And thank you everybody for joining me today. I think it's the topic that I love the most. It's how humans think and how we can use that ethically to our advantage. So I think Rupelin already covered this part. So we're going to talk about sales and the decision-making process and the influences that happen along the way. Unfortunately, this is just an hour, so I'm not going to be able to cover every single detail. But to start, let's go back. How many of you remember the first time you negotiated? The odds are you're probably less than 2. Probably most of you don't remember it either. But let's take an example that most of us can remember and relate to. Negotiating a later bedtime as a child. So what did you offer in exchange? Doing your homework? Maybe. Cleaning your room? Being a good child for the next 2 weeks? It probably depended on who you were negotiating with. Like, was it your mom? Was it your dad? The babysitter? I'm sure all of you guys have at least negotiated once going to bed later. So with the babysitter, you might have offered not telling your parents. So you knew that the babysitter, if that was the case, or maybe one of your children have negotiated with babysitters in the past, the value to the babysitter was not getting in trouble with your parents and getting paid and getting another babysitting job. So even at that young age, you knew what was of value to that babysitter. However, if you were negotiating with your mom, you probably did not negotiate not telling anything because that wasn't an issue. But some of you might have used that with your dad. Not tell mom if dad let you stay up later. So the thing is, even as young children, we knew that if we wanted to create a win-win situation, we had to adapt to who was in front of us and what they considered valuable. And you would accumulate this information through discussions, through observations. So we're going to apply the same principles now to sales. And traditional sales, well, B2B sales, we basically consider negotiations as one of the steps. It's first contact, discovery, qualifications, needs assessment. It might not be exactly these steps in a row, but it is pretty linear. So once you get to the objections and negotiations, what we're taught is that negotiations are successful if we come in from a position of strength, if we are creating a win-win dynamics, if we know the person and their decision-making process, that we never underestimate the person that's in front of us, and that's a big one. Trying to eliminate any surprises, being prepared, knowing your alternatives and limits, and the power of influence. Now, that's all very key to successful negotiations. I do not contest these. They're definitely the process that we need to, the keys that we need for successful negotiations. However, if you compare that sales to the buying process, our buyer is making, or our client or our prospect is making decisions that are based on many factors all throughout their process, not just at the negotiation stage. So from the minute they're aware that they need to purchase something or that there's a needs in their company, they're already starting to make decisions. So what I suggest is considering negotiations not as a step in the process, but as an integral part of the process. So basically, the whole time that you're talking to this client or prospect, or the multiple people in that process, you are learning to address their objections, preoccupations throughout, and you're learning what's the best thing to say and when to say it. And we'll get to how you use the influence to get there. So, successful negotiations boil down to 2 things: influence and knowledge. Your influence will give you access to more information, so up your knowledge, and your knowledge will give you more influence all the way through the process. So knowledge is power. I don't know how many of you used to watch G.I. Joe as kids, but knowing is half the battle. So we all know that we need to be knowledgeable going in to meet new clients, prospects. But what you want to do in terms of negotiation is concentrate your efforts on offering the product or service and their advantages and alternatives that matter to the person in front of you at the moment that it is suitable for them and that it makes sense for them. So of course you want to know what their role is, what their buying process is, what their personality type is, their needs, their preoccupations, their preferences, who their current supplier is, what's going on in their industry. And this is nothing new. This is all stuff that you guys already know you need to do. This is the work. And you also need to know what your product is, your services are, your industry, your competitors. The only difference is now, how do you take that information and say it at the right time? So this is when we come to influence. So influence, I wish, a lot of people wish that they were 100% rational, but buying, even in B2B, is not 100% rational. It is not objective. Even the most logical person is influenced by personal preferences, their emotional state, any factor that can come in as a human will impact that whole process. I know many of you have probably, said, well, this just makes sense. Well, the person in front of you might not think it makes as much sense as you do. So if you want to build that win-win scenario, you have to understand who you're dealing with, and you have to know what can influence them. So luckily, there are a few things that are pretty universal, and we're going to start with the compliance and principles. So many of you probably know the compliance principles. These are the basics. I'm not going to go through all of them, but every person has these tendencies of being influenced by these. These are proven. They're not out of my head. They're not out of CPSA either. These are proven stuff. So if we start with authority, so authority is people will genuinely follow the advice of someone who is recognized as having expertise. So somebody who's perceived as knowledgeable, and I do say perceived as, and we follow the advice of people we respect. Just think of all those ads where people are wearing lab coats as dentists or as doctors. These are actors. They're, they don't have any more knowledge than you or I. So it's the perception, though, that people have. So they will tend to believe that these people are actually saying something that is true. Now, how can you use authority in negotiation? Well, it's more complex than just saying that, walking the talk and being, somebody who knows. It goes way before that. So remember at the beginning, I said one of the keys to successful negotiations is negotiating from a position of strength. Well, authority aligns with that 100%. So question for you guys. When does that influence start? First sales call, first time you meet these people? And by the way, if some of you don't know, it takes less than a second to make a good first impression. You decide if you trust somebody on the second you see them. So, but that's for another conversation. But it's not that first sales call. That's not when it starts. First contact, so the first time you pick up the phone, first time you email them, not even. It's when they're doing the investigation, when they start looking for possible suppliers. So, question for you guys. What does your LinkedIn say about you? As a salesperson, if I Google your name right now, what's going to come up? People are automatically looking you up. So if you're still using LinkedIn as a job searching tool, which most of you have, instead of a sales tool, well, the impression that these people have of you is not as an expert in your field. They just see your work experience. So you want to dictate that storyline, that authority from the get-go before they even know who you are. You want them to believe that you are an expert. So go back into your LinkedIn, not right now. Wait until actually after the conference, but look at your LinkedIn, Google your name, find out what expertise you are putting forward for your clients or potential clients. So we go back to knowledge. You have to know your stuff from the very, very beginning. And this you're going to say is, that's the game. That's being a salesperson. But it's not exactly how we're used to seeing it, what I'm going to propose to you. So yes, before walking in, before you even contact these people, you should know what your products and services are. That's just common sense, right? You have to know their characteristics. Again, basic sales stuff. The advantages that you offer, that your products and services offer, compared to the competition, compared to their current supplier in relation to their needs. All makes sense, right? You discover all these things. Now, return on investment on every advantage you can offer. Now I can hear you, even though you guys are all muted, saying, but how can I know this before walking in? How can I know this without knowing their numbers, knowing exactly where they're at? I'm not asking you to have specifics. I'm asking you to go in and have generic yet number-driven examples. Talking in averages, in percentages, whatever you can find based on other customers that you have. And it'll make more sense as we go along in the process. But telling somebody that you have a better product and it's going to be a cost increase of 10%, let's say. Well, first of all, you have to say it's the truth if that's the case. But if you say that the product is better and it's going to make customer satisfaction go up, that's not enough. You have to go in and say that the customer satisfaction will make them buy more. It'll go from 1 to 1.25 or increase revenues by 25%, because they'll buy more. The product's better. It can also mean that it'll be sold at a higher price. Whatever those characteristics are, the advantages are, you need to quantify. And you also must know pricing, payment terms, delivery, inventory. And when I talk about inventory, I'm talking about, is there anything you can do to help them manage their inventory? Any particulars in your industry or business, you need to know what your boundaries are, what you're allowed to maneuver in. Can you play? And hopefully it's not the price. If you can maneuver around with everything else, just know what it is, what your boundaries are. I've met a lot of salespeople who tell me, yeah, but I don't know what their pricing is going to be or what the deliveries are or the payment terms are going to be until I know exactly what they're buying. I'm not asking you to have the specifics along the way. I'm asking you to know what you can offer, what things you can build on, because knowing when these objections come up or when these preoccupations come up with your client, if you already know that you can't touch delivery, payment terms, or delivery is out of your control, well, you can already address these issues and not wait till the end when it's negotiation time to actually come up to them and say, well, I can't meet you there. That's not something that's out of my control. You can do it as you go along, as you're having those conversations. Because most of you want to build relationships with your client. You don't want it to be 100% transactional where, they're in for the price, out for the price. So knowing these little things all the way till the end, to when you make up the proposal, you're building the proposal as you go. And you're negotiating the little things or big things as you go along, because you know what you can play with and not. And these things are, if you don't have access to this information, talk internally and get the info. What are the boundaries that you're allowed to play in? Because it's not every company that has the same flexibility on these different things. But you have to know these things and have examples of how that can build an ROI for your client. And now the big one, why we need to know personality types. And all of you probably know the analytical, the driver, the amiable, the expressive. And most of us use this to create rapport, which is a huge influence. We generally like to talk to people and take advice from people we have something in common with. Makes sense. If you guys are going on vacation somewhere, who are you going to believe? The people online who are rating the resort, or your friends that just got back? So same thing with clients. They want to have a rapport with the person they're going to do business with, to different degrees depending on the personality type, but still. But it's also a question of building the influence of reason. We respond to things that make sense. And you're going to say, well, Christine, come on, that's just common sense, right? Well, what makes sense to one person might not make sense to another. So you have to adapt how you say stuff, when you say stuff, depending on that person for it to make sense to them. So let's go through the different types. So analytical, very detail focus. So you're going to have to give details. You're going to have to give information. You're going to have to use very logical analysis to present that information. So think detailed ROIs. And you're going to tell me, yeah, but you said to give them generic. No, start at generic, build with them, get it to a very specific number with their collaboration, of course. But what you want to do is really focus on the technical requirements and the quality of what you're offering them, because that's what's important to them. It has nothing to do with people. It has nothing to do with results. For them, it's all about the quality. And please, please take this with a grain of salt. Nobody is just one type. So you're going to have to adapt to these people. But these are basic guidelines where most people tend to be more one personality type than others. Next one, driver. If I did a poll right now, I would be willing to bet that a good part of you, if not all, are between analytical and driver, with the majority being drivers. That just tends to be where salespeople mostly are, which is fine. So here you're going to be focused on facts, but summary of details. You're not going to give them all the details. Be concise. Think executive summary. So basically, if you can cram it all into one page, that's as much as you're going to go. So what you want to do with these people is give them the sense of control. Give them a sense that they're winning this negotiation throughout the process. They're really focused on best for business and results. So everything has to be geared towards attaining the results that they want. So you're going to talk objectives, you're going to talk ROI, but in terms that fit with them. So the same thing that you would have presented to the analytical is going to be slightly shifted for this driver. Now, the next two are a little different because they focus mostly on people. So amiable. So they just want to build that relationship and trust. They want to rely on their instincts, on what's going to be good for the team, what's going to be the outcome for their people. So everything you're going to present to them will be for you, as in the general you. You will talk about their team most of the time and not just them as a person. Try to get them to have the team involved at different stages of the conversation. The building relationship and trust from experience, this means that the courtship part of the relationship is going to be a little longer, and probably most of your sales meetings will have to have small talk built into it. And you'll need to be a little more patient if you're a driver. But these people tend to be loyal, or as loyal as a client can be. So take the time to, learn about their team, learn about how they work as a team. It's very, very important to them to see that happiness. And the expressives, well, they want simple explanations. They want something creative. They thrive on experience. So what they need is for you to give them something tactile to do. So if you can allow trials, samples, visits with other clients, testimonials, let them experience what they're doing. And an important thing is giving them a sense of validation and public recognition. So if you can somehow get more of the team members into that meeting and praise them during that meeting, of course, it has to be genuine praise. If it is not authentic, it will be felt. So you have to be super careful on these. But you know, they're gonna go all in because they want what's best for the stakeholders, but it has to be based on their personal experience. So you have to kind of, if they haven't dealt with you before, if they haven't used your products or services before, you're going to have to give them something to experience so that they will go in. So that'll change how you present your things. And now biases. This one is something, I don't know how many of you are familiar with biases, but it's something that's pretty much universal. And it's an inclination towards something that isn't, it's not rational. It is almost, I don't want to use reptilian because that's not exactly it, but you're going to go towards something without even without even knowing it. It's not a conscious effort. So I'm going to go through a few of them that have a major impact on the buying and the decision-making process. Confirmation bias. I think most of you probably know what a confirmation bias is, but just to make sure, it's that we gravitate towards information that aligns with and confirms what we already believe. So if you're aware of this as a salesperson, you know that you're going up against things that this person already believes. So you either have to align with that, or you're going to have to go an uphill battle to contradict what they already believe. And confirmation biases, all the biases are actually both ways. So you have to be careful when going in that you're not going in with your already predetermined ideas about this client. You might be missing some very crucial information because you've already got information in your head and you're just going to ask the questions that align with what you believe. The anchoring bias is we tend to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we are given about a topic. So if you're not the first person to give them information about a product or service, if you're not the first person to talk about something, somebody else has, and they're going to believe whatever information that is. So knowing this, you're going to have to work on, actually, I'm not going to give you too much information about that because that's part of the prospecting workshop that we have in May. So come back to me in May for that one, but it gives you a good idea. And now the next two that I want to talk about is the halo effect. And this one is huge. We tend to focus or allow one specific trait or an overall impression of a person, a company, or a product influence our judgment of everything else about them. So remember when I was talking about your first impressions, about your social media presence, all this, it actually will dictate how they see everything else. I am sure that you have all lived, unfortunately, when a client has had one bad experience, one little thing that didn't go well, and then everything apparently was wrong. So this is something that happens regardless of your best intentions. Things will go wrong, things will happen. So knowing this will help you adjust what you say when you say it, because you're coming in from a place of knowledge. You know that this is going to happen. So do your best, get as much positive influence in there before anything else influences their decision. And the framing effect, Well, this one's fun. So we tend to decide on options based on whether the option was presented with positive or negative connotations. That seems pretty straightforward. What if I asked you guys, suppose you were looking, we're going shopping for a jacket right now, we're going online, and there's two offers. First one, full price, $100. Second option, 50% off the full price of $200. How many of you, well, I'm going to guess most of you have taken the 50% off the $200 jacket. So why the second? Why did most of you take the second option? It's because of loss aversion. Most of us don't. We want to avoid losing. So even if it's compared to an equivalent gain. So in this scenario, you decided you didn't want to miss out getting the more expensive or better jacket that's worth $200, despite the fact that you'd be spending the same amount of money for probably the same or an equivalent jacket. It's just the way it was framed. So all of you know this, how many marketing companies base everything on this, but it's a question of everything that you say, depending on how you present it, will influence what they decide. So another point, when faced with the decision, we rely on the information that is readily available rather than examine other alternatives. So basically, and we're all guilty of this, we're lazy. We don't want to have to start calculating stuff and thinking of stuff. We want the information right there. So remember when I said you need to give number-driven ROIs and advantages? This is why. You need to push that reflection so that the people in front of you don't have to do it. They won't. It's not their job to think for you. They want it all there in front of you, and that's normal. So let's say I told you guys, buy my better product, it'll save you money. And instead I say, buy my product, it'll save you 15% per week. Just the fact that I put a number in made it more real, more tangible. So I don't have to calculate anything. It's right there in front of me. So think of the same thing for your clients. And I'm going to be careful with my language, but just don't assume that your clients will make the deduction that, that they'll calculate the stuff in their heads. And as you go along in the process, they will give you more specific numbers, and then you'll be able to give them real numbers, but at least start with a percentage, something based on facts that you've lived with other customers, and it'll create that link right from the beginning. So when you're doing things that are clearly framed, your customer will be more inclined to actually buy from you. And now we get to active listening. And all of you are probably experts in active listening, or I hope so. But listen to understand instead of listening to answer. And that's something that a lot of us are guilty of. So ask questions that actually give you more insight and not just confirm what you already believe. Dig, get the details. We tend to use very leading questions, which is good when we want our client to go the way we want, except at the beginning, you need to ask questions to make sure that you're understanding exactly who you're dealing with, exactly where they are, and what's important to them. So that's very difficult if you're asking them questions that just confirm what you've already have in mind. The next one is listen to what isn't being said. And that's reading between the lines, looking for the pauses, looking for, of course, the physical reactions. There's so much that you can gain in insight with people who are in front of you by just taking the time to actually observe how they're behaving and what they're not saying. And what they're not saying tells sometimes more than what they are saying. And the next one, don't be afraid of silence. People hate silence. People will fill in silences. So if you, when you're asking a question and the client gives you an answer, if you can count to 3 in your head, not out loud, preferably, but in your head, wait, 1, 2, 3. Just that 3 seconds, the odds are the person will give you more info because they want to fill that void. Try it out at home. Try it out with colleagues first if you just want to see how it works. But it does. And then you will get a level of detail that you wouldn't get if you just jump right in to what, the next question is. So taking your time, pausing, and you can use taking notes as a really good decoy to give that extra space in the conversation to talk. Now, you have to adapt and specify your offer as you move along in the process. That means that you need to listen. You need to be open. You need to be aware of what your criteria are, aware of what you can maneuver, but you have to adapt it. You can't go in with a scripted sales pitch. And there's some salespeople out there who will disagree with me. But when you're in front of somebody, it has to be a conversation. It can't be just exactly what you want when you want it. You have to adapt to where you're at with that other person. And I haven't talked much about multiple people, but that's part of it too. So get it down for one person, have to relearn for the next. So there's a whole bunch of techniques of who do you talk to first? Who do you, especially in group meetings, who do you address? Whose preoccupations do you address first? Little trick, give the outline, give the specs really fast, the summary, because the people who are quick thinkers, you'll lose them if you don't give them at least what they want. And then you can go into the details and address that way. But that's a whole different webinar. That's a whole different thing, but it'll help you adapt every single time, just slowly but surely going into, okay, who are you? What do you need to hear? And remember, we just went through 4 personality types, but there are a million different shades of those 4 personality types. Everybody's slightly different, and yet we're all the same. And this one's a hard one. Let your prospect or client dictate what and when things are presented. And you're going to tell me, Christine, I need to close. I'm not going to take a million years. I'm not saying give them 100% the control. That is far from what I am saying. What I'm saying is, when are you saying these things? It's a conversation. So you have to adapt. You can't wait till you're about to give them the proposal, or you have given them the proposal to address certain issues. It has to be fluid. And knowing these things before and adapting your language and some of the criteria that you're giving, it'll completely change the outcome of the proposal, because you're building the proposal as you're going. And it's the process that builds the win-win proposal. It is not waiting till the end to start negotiating things. It's taking care of every preoccupation along the way. So that's why I'm saying negotiations, it's not a step in the process. It's an integral part of the process. And you have to adapt all the way through. I'm sorry, I just lost my earbud. You have to consider all these things throughout every step, every conversation, and just build and build and build. And then the proposal basically becomes just the written version of the conversations you've already had. And there's not much left to negotiate because it's already done. You've already adapted everything to them. Of course, like I said at the beginning, humans are very complex. I couldn't share all of the applications of influences and biases in this webinar. I mean, there's over 100 different biases and heuristics, and I haven't even touched heuristics. And for those of you who aren't aware what heuristics are, they're mental shortcuts of how we make decisions. So it's stuff from experience, from formal learning, how we've grown up. There's shortcuts that build in our minds. And for those of you who want shock value, the average adult makes about 35,000 decisions a day. Almost entirely you're not aware of them, you're just making them, and which is good, or else we'd all be insane. But the whole thing is that when we're making decisions, most of them are on autopilot. So as a salesperson, what you want is to be able to influence that autopilot and make it change so that they are coming towards what they want with you. So like I said, I wish I could, spend more time with you guys on these, because there's so many. And just remember, every step, everything you say, how you say it will influence the decisions that they're making. Humans, and I also want to clarify, you're also human. So you have to be aware of these for your own sake as well. As a salesperson, if you are more aware of how you think and how you make decisions, it will help you be more open to what your clients or prospects want. So I'm not going to give you more information than that, because a lot of it is going to be in the workshop for proactive prospecting. So how to influence it from before you even engage in even before the client engages in the buying process. And C3B, feel free to reach out to us, because we do workshops on these specific influences and how to influence buying and business decisions regularly. So we have some in April. But right now, I'm going to, before opening it up to questions, because I'm sure you guys have many, I want to leave you with a quote from quite a ways back. Somewhere between 1737 and 1793, John Hancock said, "The greatest ability in business is to get along with others and to influence their actions." So even way back then, they knew that the power of influence could get businesses where they need to be. So I am open to any questions that you guys might have, comments, and experiences. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. We have a question from Gary here. For Christine, how do you adapt the negotiation selling approach for buying committees versus individuals? Typically now, less about knowing individual styles versus groups.
That's a really good question. And that's part of what I was saying earlier. When it's a group, you do have to know the individuals. I wish, because it does come down to a very emotional thing. Even if it's in a business environment, humans aren't rational. They try to be, but it's not always the case. So if you can find out what the different types are, and I'm just going to go back a sec, if you allow me, to the different personality types, because this is a guideline again of whose influence. So if we go, I'm going to just so if in a group you have the 4 types, the ones that are in a rush to get information and who want to make things go faster will be the driver and the expressive. So the analytical and amiable want to take their time. They want more info. The analytical, it's because they want more detail so that they can analyze what's going on. Amiable wants to know what the impact is going to be on their people, and is it going to make everybody happy? So what you want to do is address the driver and make sure that you get those facts out very quickly without going into many details. Then the expressive, you need to account for them and get them quickly kind of on something so that they don't monopolize the whole conversation. And then you can go into details. So I would go, if you have different, because I don't want to go into stereotypes either, because that's a really dangerous thing, but it's just making sure that you address everybody in order of how quickly they need the info, and then go into more details. Luckily, they all need the same information. They just don't need it the same way or addressed the same way. So you're going to talk about business, results, quality first. Then you're going to go into takes care of people, will make them happy, will increase, productivity, because the people will be more motivated. It's all in the language after. It's a whole, it's a case by case, but usually it's really, if you have all drivers, then you're just going to adapt to them. But yeah, it's insane, but people boil down to really very specific types of people, like things that they need as information. I wish reach out to me and we'll talk about it in a very specific examples. But yeah, just make sure you address them in order of how quickly they need their info.
Thank you, Christine. A good question from Karina here. How do you negotiate when you get limited time from the customer?
Yes, because everybody's in a hurry. That's why I say make it an integral part of the process and not a step in the process, because you're going to get the info as you go along, and you're going to address those points that are usually presented either by preoccupations or by objections. They're going to come up. So just address them as you go along, and remember that it's also in their best interest to negotiate and make a win-win solution, like to get to that point. So it might be as simple as reminding them that, taking that little bit of time and effort to making sure that we have a win-win conversation is for the both of you. It's not just, and if the person is insisting that they don't have time to talk about the real things, and maybe it's not the right person that's in front of you. Maybe this person is not where, the decision making is actually crucial. So that's something to also consider, because, I've known a few buyers who told me that they were the decision maker when in fact they were not. So just let them understand that it's crucial for them too, if they want a win-win.
Thanks, Christine. And just a good comment on win-win from Aaron here. At the beginning of the webinar, Aaron had mentioned, I would offer to sleep in so that it was of value to my parents. Negotiation always needs to be beneficial to the party that you're negotiating with.
Oh, definitely. I like that, sleeping in. I wish my kids would have thought of that when they were young. Luckily now they're older, so it's not an issue for me anymore. But I like that, the sleeping in. I'm going to add that to tomorrow's webinar in French. Thank you for the insight.
If there are any more questions, please feel free to put them into the chat.
Or even comments or experiences.
But so far, Christine, I think you've answered them all. Yeah.
Well, Wow. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this and have taken away at least one or two things. Oh, I think there's more things coming into the chat.
Lots of thanks, positive comments.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
great.
Aaron, good comment. Negotiating a timeline is so important at the start of this.
Definitely. And knowing it's important, you know, for everybody to take that time. It's crucial. And it not just for you as a salesperson, but also for your client or potential client.
How would you say someone should handle, because I think you mentioned when the prospect or client may be a group, but sometimes sales happens in groups when the team or the person who's selling the product or service also has a team. So how do you
When
approach
it's team
negotiation?
versus team.
Yeah.
I would say before walking in, make sure that your team is aligned with what's going to be said, how it's going to be presented. And I've actually told a lot of salespeople, if you're coming in with other, be prepared for them. Make sure your team shows up 15 minutes before the rest, you know, have you as the salesperson are responsible for what's going to happen. So make sure that everybody's on board, that things are defined as what role everybody has, what aspects everybody can talk about. And sometimes the sales team, some people are more technical. So you have to let them know, okay, because who we're going to be dealing with is more driver, you can't go into as many details. But with this person who's analytical, then just, you know, by all means, you have the floor. It's your time to shine and go into as many technical details as you can. So it's really a question of you being like at the lead of an orchestra. You have to figure out who's going to say what when, and make sure everybody's on board and everybody understands, and nobody is there to outshine the other, which sometimes happens in sales teams. So that's your role. You're le chef d'orchestre, like we say in French.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. We've got a good one here from Jordan. What is your go-to position with "I need to think about it" as a response?
Yes, that's the best objection ever, eh? I need to think about it. Well, one, to me, my first thing is I'm going to start questioning, is it because they're an analytical? Is it because they're amiable that they need either to discuss it with other people? Or is it just the typical objection and brush off? That's the first question I'll ask myself. And then the next thing is, I understand. Totally get that you need to think about it. If I may, can I know what specific points you need to think about? And then you can enumerate a few things. And then tell them, well, how about we go through it together so that I can answer any questions you have, or make sure that you've understood things or that I've been clear in how I've presented it. If it is an analytical or an amiable, they do need the time. And as frustrating as it is, the only thing you can do in that case is say, okay, totally understand. How about we talk next Tuesday at 10? And you make it a very specific time and date so we can review whatever questions you come up with in the meantime. Or it can be the next day or whatever it is, but you can just make sure that you give them that space, but not let it drag out. That's how I handle it. I mean, I'm sure it's the case by case, but it's some personality types need that time. You can't jump it, or you're forcing them into a situation they don't want to be. And unfortunately, sometimes that means that they'll say, sure, and then cancel everything after. So not worth it.
Thanks, Christine. Another one here from Gary. What has changed in recent times versus older tactics? How does technology influence the negotiation process, i.e. social media and other sales tools?
Social media means that people know way more about you than you used to want them to know. So you have to take control of, like I was saying at the beginning, like one of the influences is authority and first impressions. So your first impression, you are making it when you're not even in the room now, which it wasn't the case before. Before, they didn't know who you were until you showed up in their office. So you have to take that into consideration, and you have to, and I'm going to say this as nicely as possible, but depending on your generation, there are people have more or less access to you as a person online. So just, tweak what's out there. And what I was saying about the LinkedIn, I have reviewed many salespeople's LinkedIn, and their LinkedIn is still the same as when they built it, which was what the original purpose of LinkedIn was, looking for a job. So they describe what they used to do for their employers, their roles in the different jobs that they have, instead of putting forward what they've done for clients. Even their intro title is still their job position and not what they specialize in or what they're an expert at. So it's a completely different change of mindset. And the other thing with technology is that, let's be honest, everybody has access to more data, more info than you can even provide. Before, we were the experts going in to talk about different things. Now our clients already have access to a lot of that information before we walk in. So our role is to influence them and get them to see what the advantages are, not the characteristics, not what's out there, but really what the advantages are of doing business with us and using whatever we provide. That's how it's changed. And that's a huge change.
Thank you, Christine. Another one here from Samira. Would it be an asset or hindrance to have your personality type be known with your brand online?
I think the fact that as salespeople, we're supposed to be chameleons and adapt to whoever's in front of us. I'm not sure how much of a help that would be. And like I said, these are 4 types. They're very putting people in boxes. There are personality assessments that, say, okay, fine, we have like multiple, I don't want to say we have multiple personalities because that sounds wrong, but we're not the same when we're with family and friends and how we are with coworkers or how we are with clients. Or so these are just guidelines to help you rapidly assess who's in front of you. It is not who we are. So I wouldn't necessarily go out and put it publicly, but maybe once in front of a client, I would say, oh, by the way, I tend to be extremely expressive. So, please pardon me if I'm gesturing all the time. And if am I talking too fast, I'll try to slow down. Don't hesitate to tell me to take it down a notch. Or if you're analytical, saying like, I'm very, very into the specs and stuff, but I won't bore you with the details. You can do that. And then the person will adapt, will also know that you're being much more transparent and much more honest with them about who you are. So, but I wouldn't put it necessarily online.
Thanks, Christine. Just to end things off, maybe just a great comment here from Aaron. In my experience, selling group to group, listening is the most important skill, especially if you have senior roles present. Many times, silence is golden if you're presenting. Make sure there are lots of spaces for others to interject.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, listen, leave breaks. People will fill in those breaks. They will give you more info. And it's also a question of you're there. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's not for nothing.
Thank you, Christine. I think we should be okay to end it off for today. Thanks so much for today's session for everybody who's joined. Just some quick information for our upcoming workshop with Christine happening on May 3rd. Christine touched on it very briefly, but it will be on proactive prospecting, turning interruptions into conversations. So please feel free to head on over to cpsa.com/events, and you will see the listing for May 3rd from 10 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for Christine's workshop. We're very much looking forward to it. And thank you so much, everybody, again, for joining us. It really helps us to kind of learn your feedback and input on our webinar sessions. So there's a quick survey at the end of the webinar today that will pop up. Please take the time to fill it out for us. It really helps inform what we're going to do next. Christine, thank you again for today's session. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.